Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon. Depends on what time you decide to watch this video. You heard of Build a Bear. Well, today we're going to be talking about building a cosmology. We're putting the mythology in your hands, making your own deities, making your own pantheon, making your own world that your gods or goddesses, depends on how you want to play the game, run and show up for time to time. Today we will be on tonight's show. We will be accompanied by Jade, who technically this is his show. I just get to run the mic every so often. And the unforgettable, the untamable, the Shadow and Sun. You might have seen him in such movies as Dazed and Confused or Ridgemont High. Anything that you see Sean Penn in, he plays a stunt double. So, with that being said, let's get into this. How are you two fine? Now, I use this term not loosely, but I truly do mean this. How are you two gentlemen doing?
Okay. What's happening, Bo?
I'm doing all right. A lot of long hours working, but
Fair enough. Well, are you guys excited about this topic?
yeah.
I don't know if I'd use the word excited.
From earlier experiences, I find it's healthier for everybody's sanity if I'm the one asking the questions, not answering said questions, because I can be a little
theology and religion. I'll second that.
There's do's and don'ts.
I got no problem with it. There's a right way to do it, and there's a wrong way to do it. And of course, my way is the right way.
That is great perspective, my friend. All right, so we're going to start off. We're going to get this plane up in the air a little bit smoothly today. What made you decide to make your own pantheon?
I'll start. Who do you want to ask first? Okay.
Have you made your own pantheon?
Absolutely. It was all part and parcel of making my own world and not liking, mind you, at the time there was very little to go by. There was Greyhawk, Blackmore, kind of the same world as far as I'm concerned, and Arduin, and that was like it. And I didn't like Greyhawk. Arduin was incomplete. Basically, it was missing stuff that I could get a hold of at the time. I mean, I eventually picked up everything, but for a good portion of, the late 70s and early 80s. Cool, Bo. Glad to hear it. There just wasn't anything out there. And, I was already making my own world and making my own, everything else that goes along with that. So might as well make my own gods and, make them awesome.
All right. That was a good answer. And Jade.
Yeah, so when I approach cosmology and pantheons within my games, I'm really looking at like what purpose are they going to serve in my game world? What do I, what kind of players am I going to have? As well as like what are those players going to believe in? So I have the world I've built over, the last 25 years. So I have pantheons there, but the pantheons change during different eras. In the story I'm getting ready to tell now, the Bronze Age era, I'm looking at more nature themed deities or forces of nature theme. But I also have constellations representing epic heroes or their most dangerous foes from fables within the world. So when I'm looking at...
Sort of like how Greek mythology, if the gods deemed you to be a great hero, on your time of passing, they shoot you in the sky and you become a...
yeah, exactly, actually. So that is kind of where I got that concept from, was... from our own world's mythology, heroes being among the stars, and people kind of having hero worship long after the hero's dead, but still telling the tales and pointing at the constellation or the pattern of stars to say, hey, that there is Asuna, the queen of the heavens, who ascended to be with her heavenly king. So mostly I'm looking at the era, and I'm also looking at what the native people of the world are going to believe in. That's where I start.
Okay. Me personally, I have not made my own cosmology per se. If you read the rules in most of the handbooks, I am God at my table. So why do I want to share it with anybody else?
Ego. All
I know
ego.
that's not the point, but that's what I'm going with. Um, I have introduced new gods that weren't in the books. It's like using the Celtic mythology or something of that nature, what I thought would be more of a proper fit for my campaign than to build a small G from the ground up or multiple small G's from the ground up. All right. So next question in line. Hold on. We got some people. We got Bo.
Yep, blowing up our chat.
You're right. I think Bo needs some attention. So we're going to give him the cookie right now.
I'm working on it. Bo.
Are you supposed to be making your own religion?
Yeah, for my character.
Do you get a tax write-off?
I'm sure I'll get something, if I'm smart and I play my cards right. I mean, think about it, I could be the chosen one. Right, Bo? Right?
Yeah, that sounds like a cult, not a religion. Next question.
You say tomato, I say also tomato.
Just don't do tracksuits or Kool-Aid, and the world would be better.
Because I've never heard anybody say tomato, to be honest. So
where you kind of already answered this question. You've got Jade. I almost called you Seamus for some odd reason. You've already answered this question.
A man of many names.
Where did you find the inspiration to create some of these deities? Did you take from Greek, Roman, Mesopotamian religions, all the older ones, and just kind of Lego it together, Play-Doh it together? Or did you like, no, this is what I want? I will ask you, Jade, because you seem to already have the answer to this.
Yeah, so when I first started running games at my own table, I was using the Greyhawk deities because I was running D&D 3.5. They were what was in the book, so I just ran with it. But slowly as time moved on, I wanted gods that represented different things and different concepts than what was presented. Like I didn't have a problem with there being Saint Cuthbert and Pelor in the book, from the book in the game, but they were both very anti-undead. And I'm like, well, why would there be overlap in a polytheistic society? Like, why would you have both? But most of the games I've played in the past, all characters were monotheistic. They believed in just one of the deities, not that there were multiple deities. And when you look at even at our own world's history, any polytheistic religion or polytheistic people, they believed in all of the gods and worshipped them for very specific reasons and specific outcomes. They would plead to one god to for a good harvest, but they'd plead to a different god for a good hunt. So once I got over the hurdle, because I was raised very Christian, so I serve one, only
Right.
one, the only one. But once I got started separating me from the character, the character would believe in the multiple gods. The character, so I'm like, okay, well, what does the character believe? And how does that, how does the world affect their beliefs based on the gods that are presented in the world? So when I started, making my own cosmologies for my game world, I did look at a lot of our own world's religions. And I didn't look at just one. I looked at as many as I could get my hands on. I looked at Shinto religions. I looked at Buddhism. I looked at the Mesoamerican cultures. I've even looked at the Norse and Greek and Roman mythos. And from that, I've been able to like cobble together my own concept and my own like religious pantheon, so to say. And in the Bronze Age, we have in my game's Bronze Age, or my game world's Bronze Age, I kind of touched on it earlier. Like people worship the forces of nature. Like when you see lightning cracking the sky, in our world we would say that's either Zeus or Woden or one of the other gods of thunder. So I took that concept for the Bronze Age and ran with it. Like they worship the forces of nature. That's what they think is godly, and it's because it's unstoppable. You can't fight Mother Nature. You can only bend to its whims.
All right. Bo asked, "Why the overlap?" That is old. That is a good old question. Old Testament question. You need to prove that your thunder god, Sky Father, is more powerful than his sky god.
Than his thunder god, Sky Father. Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, and the Romans didn't feel like they needed to prove that they had, that their Zeus was stronger than the Greeks' Jupiter. They're like, no, they're just one and the same. You just have a different word for them.
Well,
or rather, it was the Greeks' Zeus and the Romans' Jupiter. I had them backwards, but the same concept. Like the Romans would be like, "Oh, your Zeus sounds like our Jupiter," and then they just incorporated, Zeus into the Roman pantheon.
There wasn't. Anyways, this is getting into Greek mythology, and that's really kind of not what tonight's about per se. I mean, you could definitely use the Greek and Roman mythology, but yeah, I get what you're saying. All right, Shadow, what gets you inspiration to make the gods that you made? How did you play? Was it Gumby? Were you watching Gumby and decided that you want to be a Gumby god maker?
Well, I did watch quite a bit of Gumby all throughout my life because it's a absolute masterpiece and work of art of just trippiness. I can't think of another word for it at the moment. But for me, I started with like the Big Bang and the creator idea, the creator God idea that, okay, he's making all these, galaxies and multiple dimensions and all this other stuff. And, after all that's done, kind of like in the Bible, God was more or less lonely. And what would a God do that's, created all this cool stuff? There's no way he can create, something that's equal to himself without, entering into the danger zone of, creating something that would, usurp him, which, everything, being equal, that's what would happen if God were to try to create an equal or near equal. Eventually that near equal is going to, like all kids, push the old man, and trust me, I deal with it every day. So I went and did the next best thing and kind of made the equivalent of like the angels, and they're, almost being, at the very least, children like to him, so he could teach them and try to maybe someday be able to have, the equivalent of intelligent conversations. When your child's first born, you got a long way to go before you're having stimulating intellectual conversations with them. I didn't have to wait so long, but I went that route. And then, of course, the very obvious result is some are going to rebel, and those became the the demons. And so basically my angels and demons are the equivalent of gods. And there's countless worlds in my galaxy, so there are going to be countless gods. And I just, depending on the world that they're at, I'll come up with, some good ones and some bad ones. And they're all, basically trying to be the head cheese of that particular world or even star system. Because a lot of the worlds that I run, even the fantasy worlds, I don't use exactly like Spelljammer rules, but I do make it so that people can go, instead of, going to other dimensions, there'll be different gateways to go from the planet to the moons, then from the moons maybe to other planets and other moons, and have a whole lot of, different world traveling without having to jump into the alternate dimensions. Because I think that as soon as you go to some of these alternate dimensions, you'd probably be snuffed out like, a match in a tidal wave, because of the completely different environments. You go to the elemental plane of fire, you're not meant to be there. You are not fire. You're not supposed to be there. And without the proper magics, you're just gonna, go up in a puff of smoke. And the same with all the other para elemental planes and even alternate dimensions. You've never been there before, usually, so you don't know how to prepare. And it's really hard to prepare without, going by somebody else's notes who's been there, that sort of thing. So I try to stick with the planets. And every new planet has potentially new gods, but some of the religions have spread to multiple star systems. And if that works, then I use that. It really depends, but I look at it more of wannabe planetary rulers with each planet. What's the planet like? What kind of angels or demons would it attract? When the angels, first went out to explore creation, they would be attracted, from their own personalities to certain kinds of worlds, and then they'd hang out there and, do their thing. And as the lesser races started coming about, they would try to guide them or subvert them to, their own particular desires. And that pretty much writes itself.
Okay. So the next question.
I didn't see what Scott said before this one. I used it in my current campaign. Oh, okay.
Trying to writing the questions and asking the question are all offer me two different birds. So the next question I have is: so you made your own you've played for several years. Jade has played several years, and you decide to get out your Play-Doh like it's an old Clash of the Titans, movie. And I'm going to make my own god using Play-Doh, aka paper and pen, a pencil. What makes your deities different than the ones that have already been created? What is there is if you go back to second edition, deities and demigods, and that had covered everything. Then later editions, Pathfinder has its own gods. Greyhawk has its own god. Faerun has its own gods. But you want to make your own gods. So what makes them different than the laundry list of small g gods that's already been created? I'll ask Jade.
Oh, so mostly, like I said, I started with the Greyhawk deities. They were what was presented in 3.5, and I ran with it for a while. But mostly, the reason why I made my own deities or decided to change from those deities was I wanted something that was more in tune with the world that I was building, and that my players, basically the reasons my players were fighting the good fight, and they weren't always aligned with the gods of Greyhawk. And the characters, had these other lofty ideals that just didn't fit what was already in the game, or part of the core book. So I decided to take a hard look at the games or the campaign story up to that point and where I was trying to go, conceptually, and then I also looked at what my players were doing, session after session and time after time, and just how they behaved. And then I started building my cosmology based off of those things. Pelor, while basically a sun god, I could have a sun god in the world, didn't have to be Pelor, but I was wanting the sun god to do sun god things, not necessarily expunge undead, but grant life and fertility to the land and such. I had a god of death, but it was more of the undertaker, the caretaker of the dead, more so than more like Ouijas, but in a way different. It wasn't that Ouijas just took care of the dead. This deity went one step further. It was there to not just take care of the dead, but usher them on to the next life. It was the boatman Quran, was basically the deity of death. So I mostly wanted thematically appropriate gods for my world and thematically appropriate religions for my world, as well as for my players and what they were doing. So I had one player who valued above all things strength and earth. Like he valued the land and living off the land, but he also valued the strength of one's own might. And there was no religion that covered earth and strength. I had to kind of make one on the fly. But I'd already been in a story where we had these characters who ascended, and one of them's portfolios just happened to be earth and strength. So I'm like, okay, so you follow the teachings of this individual. So they followed a minor deity, like a only 5 divine ranks minor deity, because that's what the portfolios they wanted was earth and strength, and they were a cleric. So I already had, like I said, the first story where our characters ascended, and this kind of touches on the topic from just a couple of weeks ago, or even last week, that if you have characters in a story that ascend to godhood, keep them around as gods for your next game. It could be set 100 years, 60 years, 50 years, whatever the case might be later, and they're starting to gain a following. Your players are an endless wellspring of inspiration. Use it. They will give you things that you may not have even considered as a possibility. And feel free to use that.
All right. Shadow? What makes
Can you repeat the question? So
Yeah, I can. What makes the gods you make different than the gods that have already been printed over the decades of?
Okay, without sounding like a dick, the gods out there are weak ass one trick ponies at best. My universe and even our universe is billions of years old. Going with that, so these gods just popped up, a few thousand years ago, and that's it? No, mine have been around since the beginning of creation, or more or less. Maybe a couple of months, maybe even a million years after creation. Okay, so they're still millions to billions, possibly trillions of years old. They've been doing stuff for a long time. They're not just, okay, I'm the god of strength. Really? That's it? That's out of all this time in existence, you're just going to claim strength and just go, okay, I'm that guy. That's it. I'm the one trick pony of strength. I'm the end all be all of strength. These gods have explored the universe. They've done all these things. Their levels are unfathomable when it comes to any profession, if not all the professions. Same as the demons or the bad gods, whatever you want to call them. They've been out doing wicked crap for millennia, thousands, billions of years. They're not, these just, super pumped up humans. Sometimes humans or humanoids will be elevated into those ranks. But even then, they're going to be pretty powerful to be able to ascend. So they've got to, compete with the guys who've been around for a long time, and without, something up their sleeve, some new trick, or a heck of a lot of protection from some patron god, they're just going to get snuffed out by, some, billion-year-old other god. What? No, poof, you're gone. There's only us, that sort of mentality. So I look at, what did they do before they found this world, or what have they done since they found this world? What's their actual personality like? And make them as different as I have the deities book from the original white box, the first edition deities book. I've got tons of other books on mythology and religion and things like that. And they all seemed just a little bit better than superheroes from the comic books. They're not really what I call a god. A god could do all kinds of things. A god can be in multiple places at once. Otherwise, you wouldn't have these multiple religions in different countries using the same exact idea. Otherwise, it's really just storytelling of this one god moving around. Oh, so it was the people spreading the story, not the actual god doing stuff. That sounds pretty weak. That just sounds like a guy pretending to be a god, claiming to be a god, not actually being able to move heaven and earth, should the need arise. So I made them as powerful as I could without being, the supreme being. Just really just pump as much power as you could possibly imagine into each and every one of them, and then do it again a couple more times and see what you come up with. Give them some completely unique goals, not just, okay, I'm just going to be, the god of thunder. Anybody else wants to be, thunderish, I'm just going to, smite them. That's it. And, they've got goals. They've got things they want to accomplish. And it's probably on a pretty grand scale, not just, ruling a country or a continent. Even one world is kind of weak when you think about it. So maybe they want to, take over this entire sector. Everything within 20 light years is going to be my domain, or greater, depending on, how the story and the ego of that particular god is. Just literally the sky's the limit for me. I missed what Mars said before that. It sounds interesting. Hold on. I can do that. You don't have to.
Okay. I am trying to keep up with chat as much as I can. We actually, speaking of chat, we have one star that I want to get back to. Please,
let's
chat,
go ahead and secure that now.
Ask us questions, and we will answer them between the predetermined questions, if you would.
To a certain point, their level can go, almost to, the big guy, the head cheese, as it were, the big kahuna. But obviously that creator God is not going to allow his children, so to say, surpass him without either being ready to retire or having the faith in them that they could take over the job. Now, mind you, they may be elevated to where they can be the supreme being in a new dimension. Okay, cool. You've risen to a certain point. Now start your whole, give you an entire dimension and work with it and see what you come up with. And when you get to a certain point, you'll know how he feels. And then maybe, you can understand, what was in his head when he was creating, everything that exists.
All right. Do you want to take a swing at that question there, Jade?
Sure. Let me go find it again.
Let me put it back up for you. I'm right there still.
Yeah. So, are the gods in your games really gods in the omniscient, all-powerful sense? So, I'm going to say some are, some aren't. There are gods that watch everything. They inherently just watch over everything. Not necessarily that they are going to do anything about it. because in my cosmology, one of the rules I have in place for the gods is no god may interfere with the free will of a mortal being. And that goes for the good and evil gods alike. And this is because, and it might sound weak or contrived, but once one god breaks the rule, good, bad, neutral, whatever, then it's weapons free for everyone. And most mortals don't survive god wars. Like it's extinction level events when that happens, when gods go to war. Or at least it should be, in my opinion. So when the war god of my world decides, yeah, I'm gonna force these mortals here to go to war because they've been itching to go to war, but they've had this one block, this one reason why they won't. I'm gonna remove that reason. I'm gonna have this guy just take that reason away and just go do the thing. Once he's opened that floodgate, other gods are free to intervene and act on their patron or on their worshippers' behalf. So while I do have omniscient and very, very powerful gods, I only had one true creator god in my game world, or at least in my game world's universe, who through, and it's not something that the players will discover any time in the Bronze Era or throughout. Well, maybe the Bronze Era, but the stories kind of get lost and contrived over eons. But the creator deity first created the dragons I use. The Iron Kingdom's dragons I've beefed up to being god slayers. Well, the first god they slew was their creator, the creator deity. And they splintered the creator deity's power amongst themselves because they didn't want to be beholden to one being. They wanted to be beholden to themselves, so they stole the power. Yes, Shadow.
So the creator wasn't omniscient and didn't know that creating the dragons would be his own demise?
So the creator deity knew that was going to happen. The creator deity planned for that to happen. The creator deity also knew or had
he didn't
in
like
its
to
design. So
and fake his own death so he can come back later
well,
and go,
the thing is the creator deity can't actually die. The creator deity is the power that the dragons absorbed. And if one dragon was to absorb all of the shards of the deity, they would effectively become the creator deity again. It'd be consolidating all the power.
And in which case, just do what he wanted anyways?
So, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that.
So that if one of the dragons gets all that power, he just turns into the guy that they killed, and then he just laughs at him. Thank you for doing exactly what I wanted.
In a way, yes. The point of the dragons was to spur into motion entropy to get the universe to start to change, and that was one of the big changes was the creator deity, because the creator deity just kept creating. It couldn't destroy anything. It just kept creating and creating. So the creation of the dragons allowed for its own destruction and separation to allow entropy and life to begin.
Okay.
So it was by design, at least in my creation mythos for my universe.
Gotcha. Because it seems to me a fallacy that anything can ever top the big cheese. The big guy knows everything. Therefore, anybody who ever has some sort of designs on the throne, he's a billion steps ahead of you. Knew it was coming and just flicks you aside like a fly, or you do exactly what he wants anyways.
And so in my universal game world, No one knows how old the universe truly is. Nobody knows how many resets it has had. Not even the dragon, the god slaying dragons know exactly how old the universe is and how many times they have done all of this over and over before. So
Gotcha.
I will say that while the creator deity is splintered, there is no truly omniscient deity. I will say that because all the shards need to be combined again to create the all-powerful, all-omniscient, all-seeing everything deity. But that's how I do it. How you do it might vary. So,
Well,
next question.
this is a really good question there, Scott, but that is a question that could take all night to answer.
I can answer it in one. Omniscience trumps free will. It's that simple. You may think you have free will. You may have been told you have free will, but if there's something that's omniscient, there is no free will because it can plan ahead and have lots of time to do so.
I need to get caught up on chat here. There's been a lot of chat going on, and I appreciate everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, same here. It's just I've decided, unless it's strictly
a question,
I am not going to, because I'm going to be doing clickety click rest of the night instead of asking questions.
Right.
Hey, we're only a half hour into it.
Now the question I have, see, this is, I knew this was going to start.
If there's no free will, then why punish criminals? That gets into the moral quandaries, not necessarily that gets into the moral quandaries of mortals, not so much the deities. There are, I will say that in my game world at least, there is a paradise and a anti-paradise, or an opposite to that. And if you do services to the deities of paradise, you will go to paradise. If you do services to the deities of not paradise, that is where you will likely end up. And you will either become a servant of them or suffer horrific consequences. Now, that's not to say that, the omniscient deity didn't intend for that. Because again, in my universe, the truly omniscient deity is not present. They are everywhere, but not acting.
That goes into the next question. When making these deities, do you give them a Achilles heel, a way for them to be put down? If, let's say, your group is going against an evil you make an evil deity just for your campaign, for the story, not picking one from the list, but making your own so it can be particularly wicked in the directions that you want him to be wicked in. Do you give him an Achilles heel where he can be taken out and replaced? Or sort of like how Dungeons and Dragons had the Time of Troubles, where all the deities were cast into becoming immortals, and if you killed one, you got their portfolio? Or are your gods untouchable? Yes, you can stop them, you can halt them, but you can't really put an old dog down. I'll start with you, Shadow.
It depends on the level. I've got, like I explained, different levels of deities. If you're talking about the original, the big guy at the top, no. The next level down, absolutely. There are ways. There just as there is life and death, there exists those same things for all things out there except the big guy, because he's eternal, omniscient, and all powerful. So every other god, has had plenty of time to ponder their own weaknesses, and while trying to fortify against them, they may have accidentally, inadvertently created new chinks in their own armor from whatever their goals in life are. They may have, through pursuing some sort of magic or artifacts or some sort of power source throughout the cosmos, they may have, left themselves open a blind side. So, and then there's always the ultimate good versus evil. You've got all demons and undead and devils and all that stuff can be just by the right level of holiness just be vaporized. But the reverse is almost never true. There are sometimes rules that a higher level like undead can affect a good cleric or paladin, but they have to be really much more powerful than the good guy to affect the bad guy. But the good guys, right off at first level can start putting a smackdown on the truly evil, the undead, the demons and things like that. Maybe you can't get a first level cleric turning a pit fiend, but you can get a 20th level cleric, putting that smackdown on something that's thousands of years older than just by rolling the equivalent of a 20 on a turn undead ability. So there's always the goodness that can, defeat the darkest of evils.
All right. Jade, now being in your campaign before, where I'm not saying I laid down a god-eating dragon, but I kind of did. How are your gods replaceable? Can they die? Can they?
So, yes, my main deities that are not the creator deity are replaceable. They can lose worshippers and thus lose power, because that's where my deities derive all of their power from. That's what makes them is the people's worship in them and the belief in them. With if the people or the mortals truly believe in the deity becomes more powerful. Is kind of the concept there. So the more widespread the religion, the more powerful the deity. If the worshippers start to wane, or the religion starts to go out of fashion, then that deity starts losing power. In my most far-flung future eras of the campaign, the deities are all but forgotten. So their power is minuscule by comparison to the sword and sorcery ages or to the Bronze eras, because the people believed in the deities more fervently and less in technology. So if you had a deity of technology, they're probably going to be the ones who keep changing their form, keep changing their religion to model after the new technology to stay relevant throughout whatever era. So yes, my deities are replaceable. Yes, they can technically die, and their power absorbed, because most of my deities in the world are ascended mortals, at least the ones that the people worship. They're ascended mortals for the most part. So they have figured out some way to join the Mount Olympus Country Club, and whatever method they used to get there is their undoing. So, for example, if one of the deities decided, "Hey, I'm going to, ascend with this, mythic artifact that is the scale of a god-slaying dragon. I'm going to use its power to, imbue myself with through whatever ritual. They will ascend, and that artifact cannot be destroyed. It is part of their essence. It's what made them them. So if employed against that god, if you ever find it, because that god's going to do one of two things. They're going to chuck that thing so far out into space, you will never see it again. Or two, they're going to make it a central part of the religion, and for anyone to take it up is to become a champion of them, and thus no one will want to use it against the deity. The stories will just never come about that relic could be used against the deity. So actually, to answer Scott's question, I have actually not read American Gods. I really need to. There's a
Really?
lot of really good information. Yeah, there's some really good
Oh my
storytelling in there that I really need to read.
God. As soon as
Um,
you do, you'll call me out for
I
one
don't
of
want I
these.
don't want to watch the television series. I want to start with the books and stay with the books as long as they last,
Yeah.
and then I'll go to the
Well,
show.
there's
But
only one
either
book.
way, huh?
There's only one
There's
book.
only one book. Oh, okay.
Only one book.
Either way, so my deity's chink in the armor, so to say, is typically the thing that ascended them. Now, does that mean other gods can't harm them? Oh no, the other gods are on the same playing field, so they have god-slaying weapons. They have god-slaying powers, which is again why the gods don't go to war. That's why they don't break the rules of heaven. They don't. They once they have ascended, they are basically taught here's how things work. If you disrupt the flow, you're the first on the chopping block and we will turn on you. So you're a freshly ascended mortal and you get up there and you've got 50, 60 other gods staring you down. Here's the rules. You break any one of those, all 60 of us are going to just gank you instantly. We will wreck your followers. You kind of get put in your place early on because you're a small G compared to much larger Gs.
Right.
So
Now, there was another question in chat I starred. See,
okay.
I'm trying to be better at this. If I can remember where the hell it was.
Hey, Hungar, what's happening, buddy? Long time no see.
Hey, yeah, Hunger. Hopefully you're staying healthy, man.
Actually, I can't. I thought I started and I didn't. Well, as we move on, I'll go back and look for it. But yeah, American Gods, you can pick that up at Barnes and Noble on a cheap. It is a great one. It's also
I'll put up audio.
Audio. It is definitely worth reading. Once you read it, you'll probably kind of say something to me about one of the characters I made in your campaign.
I see Scott says, I prefer to think that the gods are so busy putting all their effort into a war would be distasteful. Yeah. But the war wouldn't last long. Mortals would barely notice. Especially if a small G upstart decided to break the rules.
Now, at what level of the campaign does your deities, the deities you make or the deities that have ever been made, introduce themselves to the party? I mean, you got some deities are just completely out there, like the Pathfinder drunk god. If you go to the right tavern at the right night, there he is. Other deities are more behind the scenes operators. So my question, when making your own deities, do you assign a level for the party to be at when they make their grand introduction?
You mean actually show themselves?
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's multiple gods in Pathfinder, D&D, and other systems.
No, I get that. I mean, literally like burning bush kind of show themselves.
I prefer less bush and more beer.
Physical presence.
Sure, why not?
It depends. I've run a lot of games where there have been literally no clerics or paladins in the party. That may sound weird, but not everybody wants to, go that route. I never force it. And, if you do, I mean, a lot of people, and rightly so, look at clerics as ultimately, kind of lacking agency. They're eventually, if they survive long enough, they're going to become embroiled in and the pawns of forces and powers much greater than themselves, and are often the least likely to actually get to divine ascend, believe it or not, because they've been doing God's will the whole time. It's easier for them to be disposable when it comes to like fighters and other types of heroes. The gods seem to favor them because it's more of a victory for themselves to get a non, dyed in the wool 100% believer on their side, and they kind of have to, they're kind of on a different level. They kind of almost have to, bribe or threaten the characters, whereas a cleric is just like, yes, sir, whatever you say, sir, kind of thing. And the gods, when dealing with like an actual hero or non-believer who they want to manipulate, they kind of gotta, pull out the bigger bribes, the bigger, carrots and that sort of thing. So it really depends, and it also depends on how much you as a DM want to get that kind of involved, because once that happens, once you go down that road, you're pushing them more out of the sandbox and more onto the railroad, because most players don't want any part of that. It's like, no, I'm not doing what the gods want. Find somebody else. I'm not here for that.
Okay.
So I'm not going to say I put a level indicator on it, because the gods can become active at any level, really. It doesn't really matter. It really matters on the theme, the pacing, and the goal of the campaign itself. And I am talking more campaign play than one shot or anything like that. So for me, mostly it's the guardians that get involved the most. They are the most active ascendant beings in my game world. Some of them rule nations, some of them guide, or I shouldn't say guide, but rule, I should say guide nations along paths. And it's when one of their number dies that they really become more active and upfront for potential heroes who could ascend to the position of guardianship. Now, the guardians in my campaign are these quasi-ascended beings who are the anchor points for reality for the world, because the world exists within this like unstable region of space, whatnot, mumbo jumbo is, words. Basically, if the anchors are ever severed, something happened in the distant past that caused reality to start to come undone, and it needs physical anchors in the world to tie it into being or keep it in being. And the guardians are that. So if one of the guardians is killed by whatever means happens, the other guardians, the other 8 of them, will step up and be like, okay, hey, we need to find a replacement ASAP. We've got roughly 10 years before things start becoming noticeably horrible here. If the guardian of fire bites it, all fires of any kind can go wild. It's like wild magic starts taking place, but only when related to fire. The volcanoes become more active, so on and so forth. So the party is going to meet one of these guardians, and they're going to set them on the first steps to the road of ascension. If they make it, cool. If they don't, well, they tried. So the challenges become epic in nature, become godlike in nature very early on. Typically around level 10 is where I might start that path. I might start it earlier or later, but whatever it feels right for the game. But I don't necessarily put a hard limit on when the deities might interact. There are in my Bronze Era game, people consider monsters that are summoned from the ether as gods, little g gods. So they might pray to a god of the winds, and that god takes the form of a bird. It brings, cool winds on hot summer days, or they might, summon a water spirit of some kind, and they, bless call this spirit to bless the fields with rain, so on and so forth. So it's really dependent upon the era that I'm playing in or running, as well as, how fervent the characters and NPCs belief in the forces around them. You know, it depends on the strength of that belief. So could they meet a an upper tier god at level 15? Yeah, they could. They could also meet that same upper tier god at level 5, like they did in Wrath of the Righteous. It was like 5 or 8. The party met Iomade. Iomade directly called them to her plane, basically, in a dream, and say, I need you to do this. Here's what is happening. Here's what is coming your way. It needs to be stopped. So she sent them on a mission. But, Wrath of the Righteous was very much a railroad. It is an adventure path. If you sign on to do one of the Paizo adventure paths, it is a railroad. Just go with it. Like, that's what you signed on for.
I personally think that DDD was quite pushy and very obnoxious. But, that wasn't my DDD of choice.
She was also exceptionally angry most of the time.
I was married. Why do I want to deal with the gut? Never mind. So I actually have a few questions. Star, let's get to those really quick before I move on.
Sure.
The first one is: are your gods? Are they
humanoids?
Humanoids.
For me, it's whatever beings have ascended. They don't have to be strictly humanoid. They, if a dog got a hold of a ascendant being's ancient artifact and somehow, by whatever circumstances, completed the ritual, however that might happen, then you would probably have the first ascended dog. So I don't think that they have to be humanoid, as well as, gods could take on, many of the gods can, have polymorph and can take on whatever shape, like a bull, as an example.
Or a swan.
Or a swan.
All right. What about you, Shadow? Are your small G gods humanoid, or are they space jello? You're muted.
They for the most part are 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, humanoid, mostly with wings, in their truest form, depending on how far they are from the top levels. As they go down, they can be just about freaking anything. There's really no limit once when you come to the newer gods. They're going to have to become more different looking to not get confused with the originals by name. And there's essentially, like, I look at it like each of the races has at least two deities of some sort, a male and a female, that gave birth to that species, whether it be hobgoblins or humans. At some point, some of the gods got together, and that's how it started, with the procreation of all the other gods. And on the darker side, the demons and devil type gods would definitely think about doing it with other things to come up with more, what's the word I'm looking for, more abominations. The more evil they are, the more they're going to try and rail against what's good and righteous, and therefore do the more despicable things. And that's why you have things like centaurs and hobgoblins.
Hey. Just because
I will say,
go for it.
I was gonna say, I will say that in my more prehistory or Bronze Era setting, the gods, without not mentioning the ascended constellation gods or ascended heroes, A lot of my gods in the Bronze Era, because it's more focused on forces of nature, like the sun deity is represented by the sun. It's a glowing halo. It's the ever it's the cursed skyburner. Um, Talo or Tolo. How did I say it? Taulos is the storm deity. So while the people that worship Taulos might personify the storm as lightning in humanoid form, it's no such thing. It's just the living storm. So the stories might say, mention, a being of roughly humanoid shape with 4 arms and tines of lightnings for fingers. It's roughly humanoid in story, but it's not truly humanoid. It's just a storm.
I not making my own deities as of yet, but using deities in my campaign. I'll answer the first question and this question. I try to make sure the players there always has to be a reason to do everything when you're storytelling, when you're doing a campaign. There's got to be so it's not when the moment feels right, but okay, they're now level 10. So the dynamic of the danger level has changed. The bell curve has changed quite a bit compared to 5th level. So I will introduce if you got if you got a cleric in your party or a druid, I bring in the deity of say cleric in a dream, as you said, or the deity of the druid, and saying there is great need, great whatever. I ask upon you, my child, or whatever wordage I use, and that's how I introduce them. They will never physically see said God until much later, but they might have dreams or messages. I don't use angels, but I'll use like with a druid. I might have a fox come up that should not be able to speak common and say you are needed here, or a messenger like that way. That's how I use the meeting between the two. And the second part, my deities, my deities, when I do use them, I will be changelings by nature. They can basically be whatever form they want to be. It's kind of the 8 blind monks in a room with an elephant. They all kind of grab something and say, God must be a snake, God must be this, God must be that philosophy. And that's how I treat, are they humanoid? They're whatever they need to be. I was about to say, I hope that
they should be able to shape change, that will, with, very
right.
few limitations whatsoever. I mean, that's
Right,
part of
right.
being,
They should come to the followers in whatever form that they need. Is normally how I treat that. All right. The second question, because is in a typical fantasy, how do you keep the racist people sexual just from declaring
At wars.
Yeah. Hogwash, I guess, against each other.
I don't. Why would I?
Yeah, faith wars. So conflict is the source of story. I wouldn't stop the races or whatnot from going to war. As a matter of fact, I would likely have several factions, tribes, clans, races, whatever the case might be. I might have multiple of them at wars, in different wars, or engaged in different hostile activity all over the world at all different times, because the tension of those wars, the tension of those different differences of opinion will drive conflict, and it'll drive the story forward, especially if the players decide to get involved.
And if they don't, it's going to be a very short game night.
Yeah,
Illegal.
yeah. I'm
I'm not familiar with that word.
Which
I'm
one?
honestly not.
Lot-
The one
Lottery?
that. Yeah, give me a sec.
Yeah, that's a new word for me.
A type of judgment. Judgment, legal opinion, the legal document stating the reason for judicial decision. And in the okay. Let me go back up
Where's
to the
the word-
context of the question.
Where's the word come from?
It comes from Islam. A legal opinion or ruling issued by Islamic scholar.
Well, that is
Here,
definitely
so in typical fantasy setting, how keep the races, peoples, etc., from just varying judgments against each other? I don't. Using that wording, they are going to, judge other peoples, and they're going to probably go to war over religion, over resources, whatever the case might be, especially religion, especially if you have people who believe so fervently in a faith that when someone does something so egregious against their faith, it's going to cause friction. And I accentuate that. I'm going to push that. As a matter of fact, in my more modern settings, I have the nation I normally run my stories in, the Terran Commonwealth, is constantly at friction with the nomadic peoples to their immediate west, who are just on the other side of the mountain range that separate the two, the country or the Commonwealth versus the nomadic peoples. So the nomadic peoples are constantly raiding the towns of the Commonwealth to, gain resources. Because they don't, the tribal theory is, that they are not of our faith, they are not of our land. Why are they here? Because the Commonwealth has spread its influence beyond the mountain range. So it's causing a lot of friction. So the tribal peoples, and this is a sword and sorcery setting, so the tribal peoples of that area are constantly fighting back and trying to push back the Commonwealth. And there is a difference of religious opinion.
I've noticed throughout history there are three things people go to war for: religion, women, and land. And so I see it being religious based, as you just say, religion being the topic of tonight. I could definitely see that being a strong a strong tool to use.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of an oddball question. I didn't write it down because I wasn't 100% sure how I wanted to word it. I've been in campaigns before where I have that one player, amazing enough, not me, who says in Pathfinder, because I don't think you could do this in other systems, says, I want to be a paladin, but I'm an atheist. The question comes from, then gets
I would
to
kick that player so far out of my freaking sight, it wouldn't even be funny. I wouldn't let that person into my life. You can't do that. That's not what that is. You have to have a divine. No, it's something else.
You can be a lawful good fighter.
Yeah.
You can be a lawful good fighter.
The paladin, by definition, and oh god, what was it? I can't remember what edition it was he gets his power from the oaths that he keeps. If he breaks his oath, he loses his power.
It's not from an oath.
I don't know that edition.
It's from the service to a deity that also happens to be lawful good unless he's tricking you and is some sort of demon and manipulating you. Otherwise, it's a lawful good deity that grants you all your powers. You can't turn undead by the power of your own convictions.
All right. Well,
You just can't. There's just no way. They're just gonna munch on you while you're sitting there looking
Yep.
stupid.
no, I was
Yeah.
always
It has
kind
to
I
come
would
from
say I would
something.
definitely say you could be a fighter that is lawful good.
Gotcha.
You're a knight. Congratulations. Now, I will say, okay, if you want the title of paladin, but don't want to be beholden to a god, okay, I will make you a palace guard. Because that's what paladins are. That's where they started from. Charlemagne's paladins were palace guards.
You could also be a chaotic neutral thief walking around in armor lying to everybody.
Yeah.
I think I have an idea for my next build.
Starting with your
No.
you're
The
lying
answer's
to
no.
yourself.
Anyway,
right,
we've got several questions in chat. Starting at 8:26 with Mar Hawkman. He says, what do you think of having each deity's ascension change the rules of reality in some way? I like it, but be careful with it. You change the...
Can you put that one up on the screen so I could read it?
I'm looking for it. We're 8:26, you said?
8:26 p.m.
More Hawkman?
Yep. Just underneath Scott's... yep, there you go. That one. And he also has an example beneath it.
Yeah, I was just saying, how do they change the reality?
And then he's got another one underneath that.
That doesn't sound like changing reality. That's just bringing something new into existence.
Then the next example he gives is Ashandra's ascension gave dragons the power to take a humanoid form. I would say that,
but not changing reality. I don't see that.
I would say that if it is changing reality because not all evil dragons had the ability to change.
But that's also actually really common in other game systems. That's just starting level ability. Bringing new things into existence. Well, I get that is changing reality. I meant like, changing, water into wine all across the planet, or
and that's how you kill a planet.
Something that changes, up to down and down to up, and that sort of, larger scale changing. Otherwise, it's just creating something new. Reality, there are certain things that exist and they're constant. That would be what I was thinking. You're talking about changing.
The minor things.
Yeah, that it's not a big deal then. It's just bringing something new into existence, which is cool because that's what the players are there for. Is to, in addition to do their thing, but bring change about your world so that the next hapless group of players at your table will have history and lore to attribute to the previous players.
I don't create gods.
And yeah, so
next question.
I'm jumping down to. Oh, go ahead.
Next question: if a god is fighting another god directly, their followers will also fight. Normally, that's normally how
I would. What's good for them.
Yeah.
Oh no, you guys just watch.
Right. You sit on the sidelines and watch.
Because God's followers are like hit points or mana producing batteries that walk around and do things. So if you kill your enemy's batteries, he's got less hit points and mana to work with, and vice versa. So I've run entire campaigns around the destruction of cults and churches and religions by going after the minions. And if you do enough damage, that particular god loses a potentially a lot of power.
I'm just making my way through.
Yeah, I got
rest
one
of
from
chat
Bo at 8:42. I would love to
Oh,
see.
yeah.
Oh, that's not so much a question, more of a statement. I read it wrong. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Sure. If the
Fire lane.
god, if your god is a fire god, why not? I thought it was. That's one of the things I really liked about second edition was they really beefed up the cleric's ability to represent their deity. It wasn't just the this same list of let's call it 22 spells, first level spells, and every cleric across the planet, regardless of the deity, is working with these spells. That's pretty limiting, and there could easily be deities that have absolutely no healing abilities whatsoever. They're not, that's what not their gig. They themselves may be able to do it, but imparting it, that's not what they do. If Crom had clerics, he wouldn't be giving them healing spells. He'd be giving you maybe a strength bonus or blessings, but healing, screw that. If you don't survive, then you're not worthy.
His healing spell would be rub dirt on it until it feels better.
I can see that.
Yeah, chat is freaking blowing up. If I don't
Yeah,
get
it's
to
exploding.
everybody's remarks or show everybody's remarks, do not take it personally. I am not going to show conversations, but I will show questions. But if I miss a question, please ask again because
Just
you guys
repeat the
are
question.
amazing. And
If it's really important, you can always repeat the question.
Right. You guys are just blowing up chat, and I appreciate that. All right. So, moral of the story is we do not allow atheists in your campaigns. Players or
I'll allow an atheist. I'll allow atheists in my game.
Yeah, there would be. That's kind of, I get it if the player knows that there's going to be a bunch of clerics in the party and they just don't want any part of that, or they themselves are one. Well, then, you just prove them wrong in game one. It's like, oh, you don't believe in gods? Well, guess what? You just saw proof.
Well,
so now what are you, just stubborn or blind or just being obstinate and argumentative?
Now
it's one thing to be that way on a planet where you don't see miracles every day, but on a planet where you see miracles every day and you're still an atheist, then you're just trying to screw. You're probably just in a game you don't want to be in.
I have heard the argument for people who want to play atheists is, how do I know that they're gods? They could just be really high, advanced people in their professions.
Or aliens. Not saying it's aliens, but aliens.
Aliens, yes.
Thank you. That was beautiful, Jade.
There's this great quote from a book that you will be reading down here, hopefully at some point, where a character is an what's the right word? Apostolic? No. It doesn't matter. Moving on. He doesn't know if there's a god or not, but he works with one of the swords, Sonya.
Oh, yeah. Agnostic, yes. That is the word. He has faith in a higher power. He's just not sure what that higher power is.
It's aliens. It's not aliens.
Anyway.
It's definitely not aliens.
Now, when you're building your mud ball, and you're building your mud ball, and this is going to be a world, but you don't have any deities per se. You don't want to take a list from somebody else's book, but you want to run a campaign in this world. There's magic. There's there is no divine magic, but there is magic. Which magic to heal? Would you, as you're making this world, would your first players become said gods for the creation story?
They never survive. They never survive long enough without the divine healing magic. Unless you're going to allow for wizards to start casting healing spells,
which I said,
they'll never make it. they'll never make it past 10th level.
So even in my Bronze era game that I'm building and setting up, there are gods of the world, forces of nature that people believe in. And they believe so fervently in those forces of nature that they kind of have taken on a personality. They've taken on a power all to their own. But I've defined magic in my game and my setting as basically background cosmic radiation left over from the Big Bang. So that cosmic radiation is what magic is, and people learn how to maneuver and push and channel that cosmic radiation into miraculous reality altering or bending effects. That's magic in a nutshell. So when the primitive peoples of the world see a thunder strike up close and personal, that's the gods being angry. When they see the top of a mountain literally disintegrate and this fiery plume go up into the sky, the mountain gods are angry. When the world trembles and all of our buildings fall to the ground, the earth god is angry. When the trees start dying in mass because there's not enough water, either the sky god is angry or the nature god has forsaken us. So your early peoples or your first civilizations will believe in the power of nature and the forces of nature. Huh?
I said just about anything, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, and the early peoples will, because they can't explain what it is that's happening in front of them, so they believe it is the force of a god because they don't know any better. So, and that's how you get all your nature worship religions. That's where they start. Is they start by not understanding what is happening in the world around them. And then you could have mortals ascend, from that era or from those peoples eventually, great leaders who built civilizations, thriving civilizations, or leaders who staved off an entire flood through sheer willpower and tenacity or magic. You might even have flood heroes who built giant ships to get everyone to safety out of a valley. Those can be your first ascended beings. Not saying they should, but that is where religion can start in a brand new, fresh, dirtball, primitive society world.
Doesn't that open up the player characters into the ability of sort of forcing their way into divinity, whether you like it or not?
I wouldn't mind that. Keep in mind, my field of play is in the upper levels beyond level 30, beyond even sometimes level 40. I'm expecting my players to want to become gods. I'm expecting them to want to play in the Elysium realms of power. And become deities, have their characters become deities and become worshipped in future stories. That's kind of how I build my worlds in a way, is, the stories of players who played these characters are told in the next story. You see remnants of the things they did. You see the things they changed along the way. And if they ascended to immortality or godhood, they might have small cults of worship, depending on how long it's been. They might even have, not just small cults, but whole societies devoted to their teachings and their way. Granted, it won't be the cads that will make it to divinity. It won't be the cutthroats or the people who are the dregs of society. It'll be the people who actually stand for something, the people who actually have a cause that will likely ascend.
So that's why I never became a god. Okay.
Stand for something, damn it.
I did.
Find a cause.
I just wanted to die. That's a whole
Careful
different.
what you wish for.
Well, with that
Yeah.
character, it was harder than you
Well,
thought. I think.
that character was cursed with a bastardized form of immortality, and it was a curse. He got to grow old, or he didn't get to grow old. He got to watch everything he cared about die and turn to dust before him, and he was forced to live, for almost eternity until he finally accepted it, and not by his terms, but by the terms set by the curse. So every time he tried to end the curse prematurely, he got another 50-year sentence tacked onto him.
Life's a bitch when you can't die. All right, next question. Because I think I've actually ran out of questions I prepared because I didn't think we'd actually. I figured most of these questions.
You didn't think
were
we'd
long.
make it this far. I knew we were going to make it this far.
Oh yeah, I was like, you need at least 2 more questions.
All right. So hypothetically, you have a campaign, as Mike just pointed out, and you have a character who wants to be a god. And
Are you a god?
the answer is always yes. How would
if
you?
a demon comes out of a portal and asks if you're a god, you say yes.
Oh boy. How? Okay. You have a player that wants to be a god. Good for them.
Okay.
Scary, but good for them.
Lofty goals, but sure.
Right, lofty goals. And you run a campaign where, well, there just now happens to be an opening for little G membership. What kind of trials and tribulations would you put said player through so they can become part of your deity? Become part
Didn't
of the.
we have this question recently?
Yes, we did.
That was.
But
It's like I sounds so
I
familiar.
want
Well,
a better answer.
You want a better answer?
Answer.
Okay, fine. I'll field it first. So, the trials of deityship, one, they're going to be insanely difficult. They're going to be they're going to be rituals. They're going to be hurdles to overcome, and find a cause, fight for a cause. Because that's how you gain your worshippers. But the trials of becoming a deity are part of their story. It's part of their worship. And this gets to, I'm actually more into the campaign building side of things right now. So, for example, I'm going to use Zisuna in my prehistory game. Zisuna is the Flood General who battled against the ancient enemy. He attained ascension through thwarting a attack of mythical beings from another world. And he kept fighting, battered and bloodied, and kept trying to protect his people, leading them to safety. He had acquired at some point a mythical weapon from a great king's vault, a great arcane king's vault. And that weapon was imbued with the power of water. So he used that weapon to wash away the demons or the incursion in a river valley.
Aliens again?
Now, aliens, whatever the case might be. So in my prehistory game, the constellation of Zisuna is associated with water, but it's also associated with sadness because no one knows what happened to the body of the Flood General after he washed the ancient enemy away. Some of the legends say he ascended there on the spot. Some legends from other cultures might say he died and washed downstream somewhere, where someone else took up the blade and the mantle. So the stories and trials of what your player characters go through on the road to ascension becomes part of their mythos, part of their ascension story, part of their worship service. It also is going to be filled with a bunch of extra fluff. It's going to be filled with embellishments. So while the trial may not have been, or the godly trial to start on the path may not have been that exciting to the player who started that path, in the stories to come, it's going to be embellished to the point where the players can be like, I don't remember it happening that way. Well, that character's a god now, so deal with the consequences of your actions.
All right, that is definitely a better answer than the one we got last week. I think you were hosting, that's why we didn't get that answer.
Okay.
So I'll
I think Shadow stepped away for a moment.
all right, then we'll do. Well, where's a nice one right here?
By the way, have we welcomed RPG Grandma to the chat? I know she
No, but
popped
we
in here
need to.
a little earlier.
We
Yeah,
won't
hey,
be,
how you doing?
we won't be able to
And
get any
Bo and
RPG Grandma cookies, and that's always sad. All right, do you have players choose taboos, sins, the things they must avoid doing?
not common ones. I'll field this one real quick while we're waiting for Shadow to get back. So I don't have the players choose all of the taboos or sins. When they ascend, I'm gonna be like, okay, so decide on what your portfolio is going to be, decide on what your mission statement is, basically, for your new divine character, for your people to take and worship. And it's not the character or the player that decides those taboos and sins. It's their followers that decide the taboos and sins, because the story of how the character ascended and the trials they went through will set the ritual for the followers to follow. So did the character pray every morning or every evening? So if the answer is morning, then all the worshipers will pray every morning. If they prayed in the afternoon, that's when they pray, whatever. If you're a follower of Caden Kalian in Galarian or the Paizo world, your areas of worship are the bars and taverns, and you start worship with a beer.
I would definitely love to start worshiping with a beer. That would be amazing.
Now that being said, the followers are going to decide what the sins are, what the taboos are. So, the one of the taboos of Caden Kalian, I don't know them all, but one of them could be that you don't mix milk and alcohol. Never do a milked alcohol shot. That's just a taboo. It's awful.
Milk stouts are amazing.
No, I didn't say milk stouts. I said milk.
I would think that a lot of those would come down from the previous sponsor, which will kind of segue into the answer for the first question. Without a sponsor deity allowing you up into the ranks, you can't do it. No matter what you do, you've got to have somebody back you. Otherwise, all the rest of them are going to just say no. Okay. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
they
you're right.
Because they don't want competition. Right. You've got to have a sponsor. Without a sponsor, you can't. And that sponsor would probably impart sins and taboos to the sponsored new deity's religion. You're going to follow the same stuff that you followed from me, so your followers have to follow what you follow. You following me?
Yeah. I follow.
But that doesn't mean that they couldn't come up with new ones along the way, because that is, broadening the original religion, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay.
I to be honest though, I've never had players really worry that much about the new things like that. The old stuff, sure, they'll follow the old tenets, but making up new ones along the way, maybe, I could see bringing them in as the DM going, okay, well, for whatever reason, now your church also believes this, or they do this now, or maybe the opposites of taboos and sins, but things that they now encourage that they do, as a
Ritual and faith, yeah.
new religion, new
I mean,
traditions.
I do know a saint in an RPG setting.
Your character was a saint or became a saint.
I know.
I'm having trouble wrapping my head around that one. Just saying.
The miracles he performed were in part slaying, the eternal slaying of a god-killing dragon, among other things. Wiping out an entire town of undead in a single shot. Because the character was a gunslinger character. I remember this campaign very vividly. So he performed several miracles and ascended to sainthood. Huh?
What was that?
Still healing from the scars? Still healing from those scars?
No, that was over 10 years ago, and that was a really fun campaign.
I would love to go back to that world. I got a gun to clean.
Anyway,
people think my arrows are broke. No, let's stick a fireball and lightning bolt and a bullet and see what this guy will do with it. Or bullets that have holy water in it. So you shoot a vampire. He's suffering from lead poisoning and holy water.
Yep. That was quite fun.
I might have seen Hellboy once or twice at that juncture. Oh, no, I already did that one. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And then Bo goes into the Hercules fables. Yeah. Those are very good, examples of the things that, a god did. So, those are the stories that are told and brought forward. There might be some embellishments. Maybe the lion wasn't truly impervious to weapons, but the only way to take it down because of its thick mane or something was to strangle it.
I kind of put that question twice in two different wordings. All right. So when making a deity or making a campaign where you're introducing a new deity into your campaign, how is it a rough start, or is he just like risky business? Does the slide against the floor like Tom Cruise? Guess who's here? How do you this is a brand new godling compared to all the older gods. Will you have them to be a little bit more reckless, a little bit more conservative? I hate that. More conservative. And how do you pick out if he is a deity, does he have if he is a youngling, does he have enough juice to give his followers, clerics, divine spells?
Typically, yes.
Otherwise, you don't really have clerics of that deity.
Right. Not to mention, I think it depends upon their sponsor.
We're talking about a young deity. We're not talking about one who's been on the scene for a couple hundred years.
Yeah, well, right off the bat, as per the old rules, Deities and Demigods First Edition, once you divine ascend, you actually don't come back on the scene for a couple hundred years. You're in training. So by the time you actually do pop on the scene, you've gone through the training to be able to impart all that. You may only have a few priests to do that too, and the more power they bring you by spreading the faith, then absolutely you start gaining the equivalent of experience points, for lack of a better word. The more new priests you get, the more you can handle, the more you have to, spread your own magic. So you have to be pretty careful at the beginning as to not spread yourself too thin. Imagine it like spell slots. You can only afford so many priests before you're, using up your own juice. And it's like, well, if I'm giving it all to my followers, there's a big old weakness in the plan there. So you need for them to, get up to certain levels before branching off and creating, alkalites and things like that. So, it depends on the system you want to use. It's really dependent on the system you're using and how you want to run it, whether you want them to, just have an unlimited number of priests, and how they fuel that need is, there should be a cost, uh, economy going on there. You should have, you suddenly wouldn't have as many as the older gods around you. So how much do you get, and how much can you afford, and how much before you're starting to not be able to take, defend yourself against the attacks of, say, another god. If you're, a new one and you're pumping in, half your magic into your followers, well, any other deity around, could just come up to you and go, hey, what up? And blast you, and suddenly your all your plans are out the window because you can't fight back.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I really don't have anything to add on that.
Right.
It really depends on the system. Palladium has a pretty good system because it actually uses, PPE or magic points per day, depending on your followers, how many you can, support. And you'd really have to be very careful as to, what you're allowing them to do. You may be very judicious in the beginning, just to make sure that you yourself are protected. Now, you may share your divine realm with a pantheon, so you're kind of protected, so you might not have that issue. But if you, as per other game rules, where you get your own like heavenly realm, well, that could be besieged by a whole bunch of other, adversarial deities coming your way, and that itself could make for a great Immortals campaign. If you're gonna do that, then how do you power up your followers and yourself all at the same time? Especially if you'd made some enemies along the way, you pissed off like say you pissed off the elves, in becoming a deity. Well, they wouldn't hesitate to, fill your followers full of, arrows, and thus deal you a potentially mortal blow, and then have the big guys upstairs, besiege your realm while you are losing followers left and right, and thus losing the ability to defend yourself.
Bo asks at 904, what are penalties for your characters for violating their religious precepts? I'm curious as to which side of the violation, the character who became a god or the characters following that new god? Because I have an answer for both, actually.
Yeah.
Good, because I would need a little more information, and it seems like if you start breaking your own rules, that's gonna snowball, because the word's gonna spread amongst your followers. Well, why can he do this and we can't? Or why is he doing this and we're not supposed to? And that could just snowball.
Well,
right, or they don't believe you're the god, and they're like, oh, that's not who our god is, and then the religion shifts, more radically, because the character who became a god isn't acting the way that his followers or her followers believe that they should be acting. So then they start going even more radical and zealous in their fervor and religion, when the original God character who ascended is like, no, that you've misinterpreted my entire message. What the hell are you doing?
Because that's never happened.
Yeah, because that's never happened before. But you also have on the other side of things, like what happens when a cleric of a deity who ascended through a previous campaign, what happens if they break the rules? Well, as the game master, I have very authoritative power to go, you're no longer a priest until you atone. If you're a paladin, or you're a paladin, and you decide to, and the person has thrown down their weapon, and then they are surrendering, asking for mercy, and you decide to strike them down anyway, you're suddenly a fighter without feats, because actions have consequences. And if the deity you serve is a deity of mercy, and you show no mercy to a person who's asking for it, then you're a fighter without feats. You've just displeased your god, and you need to go on a very long, hard journey to atone and realize the mistake you made. So as far as penalties for the character who became a god, their religion shifts and they start losing power because some usurper may have shifted their religious focus to themselves instead, I guess.
I could go the other direction with this. You're a newfound deity, and something happens, and it just torques your overall personality. Where one point you were a good deity, now you have fallen. You are still a deity, but your worshippers are now Salem trials versus what they originally were.
I could see the mantle of power changing someone, especially if they took on the mantle of power. Let's say you had a person who was a soldier and just happened to be at the right time and right place when the deity of war, perished, and the mantle shifted to them. I could see the mantle of power changing them over time subtly, like urging them to be more responsible, or oversee war and the purviews therein. I could see the mantle of power doing that.
The old all power corrupts. So I don't know. It's definitely it would be a different. Depends on the DM and what story he wants to tell. But a corruption of a deity could be an interesting story. Bringing them back to his own original path could be the answer to the campaign. But I think that really just depends on the DM's prerogative on how he wants to handle that.
What about you, Shadow? Any penalties for characters who break the tenets of a ascended deity?
Again, are we talking about the new deity breaking his own rules?
Any deity.
Well, it depends. I mean, if it's an All-Father, they can do whatever the hell they want. If it's a brand new deity who suddenly becomes a deity and starts breaking the rules, if they're a member of a pantheon, that's not going to go over so well. The other people are going to be like, no.
Big G, small G.
Yeah, suddenly you get into the club and the first thing you do is wreck the place. No, we're not having it. We're probably going to lock you away for some time. Deny you I'm assuming that the magic flows downhill, from the big G to the little G, and they just turn that spigot off. You get nothing. You may be immortalish, but you're not getting any power to do anything. You're just going to hang out, and that may be in a divine prison. They may send you to hell. They may smite all your followers. So and now you've got to go back down to the real world and do it all over again, and recruit some new flunkies to worship you, and telling people, yeah, I'm so and so, the new god, worship me, and they're just gonna say prove it, and you're gonna have to do a bunch of stuff to prove that you're worthy of a whole bunch of new followers. It's going to be a GM's call on what he wants to do, but I
God.
think it would be wise to give the old DM warning before the god, because especially when you get up to those levels, a new god's going to know things that he didn't know before, and they're not going to just willy-nilly just start, like I said, wrecking the place. They're going to know that, hey, before you do that, you shouldn't do that, right? You can ask the player out of character. That's not going to go over well. The ability to communicate with the DM player wise, once you've gone into that realm of divinity, you're going to know things, part of the limited omniscience that hey, that's not gonna fly. You could try it, you may even succeed, but the consequences are going to be even more dire than they would have been had you just been a mere mortal.
Okay.
See. There are other questions popping up in chat as well.
All right. Can you follow? I got the one at 920.
RPG Grandpa at 914 did ask
Grandma?
if gods can be killed. Yeah, we kind of went over that earlier in the night. I do allow my gods to be killed and replaced by the person who killed them. I don't know. Shadow, do you allow your deities to die?
Oh, absolutely. But I definitely don't just give out divinity because you killed somebody. I'll go back to Elric again. He killed dozens of gods and did not get any more powerful. In that respect, just I mean, if you're running kind of like a Highlander-esque thing where by doing so, you get the power, and if you write that into the system, that if you kill a deity, you get the powers. But after they kill their first deity, they're going to be like, well, why don't I get that orc's power? Why don't I get that dragon's power when I kill that? I know how to do it now. Can't I just like become a living black razor, Stormbringer, and everything I kill, I get more powerful until I'm, the cosmic champion, and I'm the only one left standing in that white barren field at the end of the 6th book of Elric. Sorry, oops, did I say that? Yeah. If you haven't read it, read it. It's one of the most important sets of fantasy novels. If you're ever going to run a cleric heavy campaign with gods and devils and demons, you really should read that, because so much of the early games was based on that, all the way down to the law, chaos, good, and evil. That whole schism there was right out of Michael Moorcock's books, and he went on to write, scores of books pertaining to that. And you could bet your bottom dollar that most of the game creators in the fantasy world of games have read all of that and contemplated, all the things that he did back in the 70s. They can be killed. Every the fact that there's a god of death is pretty much proof that they can die. Even the gods die. Look at our world today. I mean, you don't see churches of Thor and Odin on every corner.
That's not on every corner, but they do exist.
Yeah. So do insane asylums, and they're pretty much the
Actually,
same
no,
place.
insane asylums no longer exist. They're called mental health hospitals.
Yeah, try getting out of one.
Looks like we got another question in the chat. You already got it highlighted there.
The followers change their deities, personalities, and alignments like a two-way versus street.
There's one.
That's up to you.
I'm gonna go out on a limb. Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that. Yeah, it's up to the game master. Me personally, no, it's a one-way street. The deities, once they have, once they are what they are, they're almost immutable, even to their followers. like, can they change? Yes, but
Do you
not
want that to
any
happen?
time in the not any time in the near future.
Well,
Like
that
that
goes
would take eons.
back to what I said before. If you have a deity that has just seen too much and breaks bad, you could have a campaign where a cleric in a group of party goes to try to amend or try to bring the deity back to his former glory. I'm not completely opposed to the idea. I think it would take a greater DM than I am, the storyteller, to write that concept. But I'm not too, I'm not going to say that once you become a deity, you're now a marble stone. You do not change over the eons. You're still,
Why would you though?
Yeah, exactly. I
If
was
you're
just going to
convict,
say,
if
if you're
go
like
ahead.
saying you're an elf god, you're a god of the elves, and you're all nature based, peace and love, go forth, my children, and be one of nature, then the humans, because they really are the bad guys, come in and deforest the elves' home and kill the elves. That god at some point is going to say enough is enough and start, helping his clerics change the domain of the cleric spells from uh was grow whatever growing shit to destroying shit.
the forces of nature.
Yeah, because that
I mean, yeah, I don't think it would be an over to the night type
no,
thing.
it would have to take hundreds of years. I'm not saying it would, be.
But why at that point? Why would the elves continue to worship that elven deity when there might be another elven deity that does preach, the practices of war, the practices of violence,
I'm not saying that there
from a
isn't.
different sect?
Yeah,
I'm just
we've always got to remind ourselves to ask why. Why are we doing anything, big? Yeah, the little stuff, I get that, it's not a big deal. But when you're talking about a drastic change to everything that's come before, why? Is this where you want your campaign to go? Do you really want to? I mean, because at any time you could say just no. I don't want this. I don't want to be a part of this. This is not what I, as a DM, signed up for. You have that right. I've talked about it before when running evil campaigns. Um, it can mess you up as a human being. Running something that you're not happy with. If a game or a campaign takes a turn that you're not comfortable with as a DM, you're not, required to continue something that's, whether it be against your religion, your morals, you're just not having a good time. It could be keeping you up at night. It could be, giving you anxiety of different levels. If something like that is going to happen or give you those kinds of effects, you have every right to just put your foot down and go, no, this is not what I signed up for. I'm not having fun. You guys, doing nothing but whatever it is, is there's no enjoyment value for me. You guys may be getting your rocks off and having a blast, but as a DM, not feeling it.
well,
And a big change like this could be one of those things.
I get that, but a lot of us likes to do the oh god, what's the name of that? Where a guy is fallen and the campaign is to be able to pick himself back up.
Sure, sure.
Why can't we? Why couldn't that be a deity? I'm not talking about the creator deity. I'm not talking
Well,
anybody
right
in
off
his.
the bat, with a deity, like I said before, with becoming a deity comes a certain level of omniscience. They're going to know bits and pieces of the future. Maybe not all of it. Maybe all of it. If they become the new head cheese, they're going to be like, no, I know what's going to happen. We're not doing this. That being a god is more than just having great numbers. There's a whole lot of literally unwritable rules that would come with it. the powers are not just, oh, now I do more damage, now I have greater stats, now I don't die. There's a whole lot of things that come with it, including a huge amount of wisdom to know, yeah, I don't want to go down that road. I'm not letting my followers go down that road. I'm not letting my planet or my world or my you know,
Worlds.
yeah, right, go down that road. It's not just, you know,
I don't.
that was one of the problems with the old deities and demigods books. They portrayed all the deities as nothing more than really powerful player characters with high stats and lots of professions and lots of levels, but nothing went into the the universal abilities that would come with being a divine entity or even an infernal entity. You would know things that we can't even imagine because we're just mere mortals. There would be a whole lot keeping you from going down those roads. You
See,
know, maybe why the gods don't go into, you know, all out warfare. Because, you know, once the gods went into all out warfare, there would probably be a winner and nobody else. One side would win, and if it was the wrong side, there'd only be one winner. Your whole world would be ruled by Satan or it's the equivalent, and there would be nothing but misery and hell on earth. And if it's the good guys,
And
there would be no more bad guys. And the ensuing utopia for many would be the equivalent of a living hell as well, because all the good gods would be there, and there would be no room for you chaotic neutral bastards out there.
and you know that's why I said at the top of the stream, like, you know, if my god, and this is why my gods have certain laws or certain like deific rules they follow, is because if any one of them decides to purposely and knowingly break the deific rules, it's weapons free. You know, all the gods can gang up on whoever, and you know, so one of them being, you shall not subvert the will of a mortal. That being one of the biggest ones. So, you know, if a deity, good or bad, decides to do that, now demons, they can subvert the will. They're not deities. Devils are not deities. But you have good and bad deities, and if any one of them decide to break the rule on purpose, well, you have a god war, and it's a apocalyptic event. It is a truly nightmarish thing on the planet. The planet basically gets reset, and either you have one god, a handful of gods, or the last god standing, well, might restart the world. They might not. They might just walk away, and then you're left with just a barren world. You know, so to me, like, when gods go to war, the entire world trembles. Like, all of creation, all of the peoples of that world fear what's coming.
All right. Well, you guys both have given me some very interesting things to think about. I hope they've done the same with the chat. I don't think my gods, other than the created gods, will ever be omnipotent. I don't. I think that's just cheap writing, in my opinion. That's just lazy writing.
Then what does it mean to be an actual god? Is it just, okay, I'm super high level and that's it? You have to have something more than that.
Depends on how you look at it, and that's to each their own. I think the big G, not little g, but the big G, knows that everything's going to happen, and he might tell the other small g's what's going to happen, or he could keep it to himself.
Right, because you run the risk of, you know, if there's nothing more to it, then you run the risk of players creating armies of gods by helping each other out and making sure that they defeat these monsters and gain the experience points and even find ways to improve their stats to make their numbers the equivalent of the you know, stat blocks of the gods in the books. You can do that.
even if you make the 40th level, unless you have the divine spark, you're not a god.
Right, but
You
what
have
does
to be
that
a
divine spark
sponsor, as you
include?
said.
What would
It
that
would never
spark
be part of the
include
loop.
besides?
There would never
Pardon?
be divine peaches of the heavens of Asia, or uh, ambrosia from the Greek mythology, or whatever. There would not be there might be a cheat, but it wouldn't be something that a player could find in the loot. Why would it just would never happen that way? And that's my opinion. The way you run your campaign is the way you run your campaign. I say Big G knows what's going to happen, and the little G's just kind of don't, but they have the ability to affect it in ways that are in their
So
purview.
they can't impart the divination spells.
Well, divination, to my opinion, is always kind of tricky, but that's my personal thought processing on it. This is, like I said, how you run your game might be different than Jade. Jade
Well,
might be different than mine.
there are a lot of spells that the deities can impart upon their minions that benefit from omniscience.
How far down
Divination
the road
being
do they
one.
get to see? How far down the road do these things get to see? But we're after 2:00, after the 2 hour mark.
Gotcha.
And this is more or less the reason why I didn't want to have to answer. I decided to host not to answer it, because it would have been the people would have got 2 hours of me you fighting, not fighting, having a lively conversation. Know thyself. With that being said, I'm gonna kick it over to Jade so he can wrap up the shindig. All right. If I knew how to use my laptop correctly.
You and me both.
So, if you've enjoyed this content tonight, please make sure to hit that like button. If you really, really enjoyed our content, please consider subscribing to the channels listed in the description below, as well as the channel you're watching tonight. For those of you who want to join our Discord or pose questions to the gatekeepers themselves, our Discord is open, and I will try to have a link provided in the description of this video to Connell after the show is over. This has been Gatekeepers, and I really appreciate the chat for being so active, and we here wouldn't have a show, well, without you watchers watching. So thank you very much, and I'm going to throw it back to Connell for the final outro and the final word. Have a good night, everyone.
Like a true deity, I do have final say, at least for tonight. That will pass till next week. Next week, Shadow will be hosting us. That will be April 19th.
Is it Shadow or is it me?
What's the
Shadow
topic?
or is it me?
I don't know.
If it's
My phone
demons
just
and devils,
died, so I can't tell you. And tell you what,
yes, that's right. It's the bad gods. It's the forces that oppose the gods. That is going to be Shadow next week. Good call.
Gratefully say that I will not be here for that conversation, because that would be so much fun. I might have to find a way. I might have to find a way to get the DM to blow up that night and not run. It's a small thing.
Wouldn't be a first.
It won't be the last.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, it depends on how forgiving your GM is.
But with that being said, here's a couple thoughts to think about. When you are making your own pantheon, how much do you want the outside world to affect it? Are you going to sit down, read Norse mythology, Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology, and all the other earthly mythology? Or are you going to turn on to Star Trek? And remember, Q was one charismatic son of a bitch. With that being said, roll your dice in the dark and fill out your character sheet with a red crayon. Why red? Because that is the best color. Everybody have a good night.
God bless.